We've talked a lot about something this weekend, and maybe we didn't say the word exactly, right? But the word we really should have used is persistence, because there is no doubt about it that the game of real estate is a game of staying power. It is definitely a game of staying power. And people who stay in the game will almost always win the game, and people who get out of the game too early will declare themselves a loser, because they will let one little upset derail their big plans. You know, I mean, I remember years ago when I was first getting into this, we had a client and she worked at PIMCO, the bond trader, right around the corner. By the way, I didn't mention this morning, but this area is called the Wall Street of the West because of all these financial firms, right? And PIMCO, the biggest bond trading company in the world, is right here. And you know, Bill Gross was one of the founders and involved with PIMCO years ago. You probably heard of him. And you know, she came to one of my seminars in our little office right around the corner here in Newport Beach, and she said, "Oh, I'm totally into this. You know, I mean, the corporate world is just too high pressure. It's not worth the sacrifice. Blah blah blah. And I want to buy 40 properties from you in rapid succession." Well, sounds good. Sounds like a great client. I'm excited. How can we help? Okay. Wouldn't you know it? She buys her first property, and the first little thing that doesn't work out, she's like, "Oh, this is too difficult. I'm not going to do it," right? You know, so usually the people with these big grand plans, you know, it's like the thing that works is the person who is just willing to do the little grunt work and to do it over and over again and to do these repetitive tasks over and over again. And you know, ultimately you can delegate those tasks. It's not like you have to do them forever, but that's what usually works, right? And what makes people persistent? You know, like it's easy to say, well, be persistent, right? And then you'll win the game, whatever the game is, right? You know, Tiger Woods, he was learning to play golf when he was 4 years old, and he was just incredibly persistent about it and became, for a time, the world's greatest golfer and the world's greatest cheating husband. And, you know, I mean, you know, he really excelled at a few things. And almost got killed by a golf club, actually. So, but, you know, what is it that, you know, like instead of saying the glib thing, like just be persistent, you got to be persistent, right? And there's that famous quote about persistence. But what really makes you persistent? That's actually the question. And one of my favorite YouTube videos is the TED Talk by Simon Sinek, when he talks about find your why. You probably know this video, it's a very famous video, but it's really good. So, you know, when a lot of people are worried about the how to do this, how do I do it, right? You hear this all the time. They get a how-to book. They think about how do I do it? When they really need a reason to do it. Because with a good enough reason, a good enough why, the how will just reveal itself. Okay? I mean, when I grew up relatively poor in Los Angeles, you know, at 16 years old, I saw this infomercial with Robert Allen talking about how to make money in real estate. You know, I got the book, I read 3 chapters, I put it down, my mom read the rest, and she started getting really into it. 2 years later, I'm 18 and I'm about to graduate from high school, and she says, "You know, Jason, you got me interested in this real estate stuff. I've been going to all these seminars all these years and reading these books, and there's one in Anaheim this weekend by Disneyland. Why don't you go?" So I got 9 of my friends from high school to go, and you know, they all came Friday night, and the first speaker was a guy named Hal Morris. He lives right here in Newport Beach. And if he's still around, I don't know, but it's been a few years. And he lives right here. And you know, he was up on the stage and he was talking about points. And I didn't know what points were. Points on a loan, you know, 1% of the loan, that's a point, okay? And so all 9 of my friends were there on Friday night. And by Saturday morning, it was a whole weekend thing. By Saturday morning, only 1 friend was left. Everybody else went to the beach. And by Sunday afternoon, I was the only one that finished the whole weekend. And on Monday morning, I remember Earl Nightingale telling me on one of those tapes, you know, and he used real estate as an example, but it was just an example. He said, if you want to get rich in real estate, just learn the business first. Just learn the basics. So I thought, okay, well, how can I learn the basics? So I enrolled in Century 21 Real Estate School for $99, not adjusted for inflation. And that's exactly what it cost back then. And when I was 19, my first year of college, starting at Long Beach City College, I got my real estate license. And I started selling real estate part-time for Century 21 in Anaheim. And I just learned the business first. And wouldn't you know it, about 6 months later, one of my clients that I was selling, my mom taught me how to sell government repos, and these were disgusting houses. Oh my God. Like you'd walk into the house and it had boards on the windows, and she got into real estate about 6 months before I did and started selling government repos for this company in Bellflower, California, called Americana Real Estate. And you'd walk into these boarded up houses, you'd show the house to the buyer with a flashlight, I kid you not. And back then, flashlights weren't LED, and they weren't very bright, and they didn't work very well. And you'd show the house, and you'd come out of the house, and your legs would be bitten up by fleas, right? Yeah, because they abandoned the house, and there was a dog in there, and all the fleas, as soon as anything walks in, they just bite you like crazy. And you'd bid on the house. And anyway, I had this client. His name was Jim Wool. He worked in Anaheim, and he bought a few houses from me. I drove him around in my little Volkswagen Jetta. And he bought a few houses from me. And about 6 months, later, after I was 20 and a half by then, he said, hey, I want you to sell this little condo in Huntington Beach for me, and I'll just buy another one from you. I don't like this one because it's a one-bedroom and it doesn't rent very well. And I said, Jim, I don't want to sell it for you. I don't want to take the listing. I want to buy it from you. So I bought that property from him, and I had the worst tenant ever, okay? I would go over there with my baby face and try to collect the rent, and they just said, we're not paying. That's basically what they said, okay? And so I had to evict my first tenant. That was a terrible experience. The house was left in terrible condition. They were like repairing a motorcycle in the middle of the living room, and it had carpet, and it ruined the carpet. And it was a disaster. I could have so easily given up then. I could have so easily just said, this doesn't work, right? But then I remembered, in reading Robert Allen's book, the quote, and you've all heard this quote, it's the famous quote, let me get it here, from Calvin Coolidge, right? Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent, right? So that inspired me to be persistent, and I did sell the house, and I did do a 1031 exchange, and I did make a little money on it when I sold it after my terrible tenant experience, and I kept buying properties, and I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And that was obviously a very powerful thing for my life and career. But I heard this quote in an audiobook the other day, just last week, and I realized that persistence is probably not the right word. What's really the right word underneath persistence is the word adaptability. And at the beginning of the audiobook, they shared a quote by Charles Darwin, okay? And what did he talk about? Natural selection and adaptation, right? And he said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. And let me tell you, the world we live in today, the world has never changed faster than it is today, okay? So we've got to be adaptable to change. And when you look at any big storm that comes along, any big hurricane that comes along, which trees get knocked down? The trees that don't bend, okay? The ones that bend with the wind and adapt, they stay up.